Welcome to the Porsche Club Insider, your one stop for all things Porsche and PCA. Here's your host, Vu Gwyn, and the Insider crew.
Welcome, everyone. This is episode 172, and you are in for a treat today. We are at PCA's national office, and to the right of me, I have Manny Altman, as usual, and I have Damon at the controls. We're going to introduce our special guests here shortly, but before we do that, I want to thank Pirelli for their sponsorship. Without their support, none of this would be possible. I want to thank you for listening. If you aren't currently a PCA member and own a Porsche, grab that VIN, head over to PCA.org. For $56 a year, you can be an official PCA member. And for those of you that don't currently own a Porsche or you're looking for a Porsche, we have the test drive program where we'll unlock resources. You might even be able to chat with Manny and he can help you find that awesome Porsche for your driveway or garage. One of the key benefits of being a PCA member is you get to participate in the PCA raffles.
Well, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Because when this comes out, the cutoff is already over for the raffle. You can still participate in the next raffle.
The next raffle.
I just remembered that when Charlotte told me what the 17th, I think, is the cutoff.
Yeah. Oh, this is when this comes out?
It comes out on the 23rd.
Well, then you can become a member and join the fall raffle.
Yes. Yeah. Or any other thing we do.
So that means in a few days, we're going to pull some names that, I almost say kind of change people's lives. Like we're going to have, yeah, someone's going to have a GT3 plus $35,000. And I think we're up to 3 911 Carreras plus $35,000.
Yeah, second place is the 911 Carrera.
Not too bad.
I would take one in a heartbeat. Not
too bad. So again, if you have a Porsche, what are you waiting for? Be sure to make yourself a PCA member. Now, as I said, it is going to be a treat today. In my office, one of the first pieces of, I would say, art or poster that I put up contains this quote: "Dream as you'll live forever and live as you'll die today." And none other, if you've read the title of this today, we'll be talking about none other than James Dean and our guest, who is the leading authority on everything James Dean, but more importantly is PCA's longtime member. He's a 356 registry trustee, again, world-renowned for that knowledge that's in his noggin. Lee Raskin, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
I got to tell you, the first time I joined the club, when I first joined the club, it was a couple meetings into it. I heard about Lee, and somebody said, there's a guy in our region who is trying to find James Dean's car, which at the time I didn't realize it was a Speedster or the 550. I assumed it was the 550.
Both.
And he's got a map in his house of all the possible locations, and he is like, he's going to find this car. And I thought, wow, that sounds like really interesting. I didn't realize the car was missing. But the fact that someone, this is before the internet, so the fact that he was researching and trying to find this car, to me, was pretty cool.
We talked about it earlier. It's incredible, this legacy, this mystery, the attention that the name James Dean gets, because his official career was quite short-lived. Ooh, maybe I shouldn't say it that way, but I mean, it was short, right? He had like a 5-year movie career. He got his start.
Was it 3 movies, I think?
3 movies.
3 major movies.
Everybody knows Rebel Without a Cause.
Giant.
East of Eden was the first.
East of Eden was the first. But why? How did? Well, let's back up a little bit. Were you into the James Dean world before you became a PCA member, or were you a PCA member first?
Well, I was 10 years old, so it was before I was a PCA member, and it was before I knew what a Porsche was.
Huh.
My sister was 12 years old, and all of her girlfriends were just enamored over James Dean. He was doing live TV. And at the time in the 50s, you had one TV. It was black and white. So my sister won out, and we watched just about every episode of James Dean on live TV, CBS. He did Philco. There are a number of episodes. He probably did 30 episodes. And so she would watch it, her girlfriends would watch it, and of course I had to watch it. And it wasn't till after he died that I saw that he was involved with sports cars, with a Porsche. My sister created a shrine in her bedroom.
Really?
Floor to ceiling of all the fan magazine photos. And of course, there were photos of the Speedster and the Spyder and the wreck. And if I was on good behavior, she would invite me in and let me look at it. And that's something that just stuck with me. But most importantly, going back a few years to 1953, I was living in Omaha, Nebraska then. My family lived in Omaha. And General Curtis LeMay, who was in charge of the Strategic Air Command, started grassroots sports car racing at the Air Force Base races. So Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha hosted its very first sports car race over the July 4th weekend. And I begged my father, please, can we go? And somehow he got VIP tickets.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize what that was. And I didn't realize that I was a VIP, but there we were sitting in the front row at the straight. And after the race, after the main race on Sunday, my father gave me a ballpoint pen. And I didn't know what a ballpoint pen was. They were fairly new back in the 50s. And he had the program that he bought for $0.25. And he said, take this and go up there and ask for an autograph. I didn't know what an autograph was.
Really?
And I said, what do I do? He says, give them the program. They'll know what to do with it. So the two winners, the winner, first and second, raced nose to tail in the event, a Ferrari versus a C-Jag. The Ferrari was driven by none other than Carroll Shelby.
Wow.
And the C-Jag was driven by a fairly young guy. He was just 22 years old. They called him the Kansas City Flash. It was Maston Gregory. Mm. And I got my first two autographs on the program, and that is a treasure that I'll never, ever forget. It was really wonderful.
So do you still have it?
I certainly have it. And years later, I never met Maston Gregory because he died at a young age in his 50s, but Maston Gregory could drive the wheels off of practically every car. I mean, he raced sports cars, Indy cars, NASCARs, Formula One cars. He was terrific. I had the good fortune of meeting Carroll Shelby for the first time at Jay Leno's hangar in Burbank. And Jay had invited me. I was doing a book talk at Auto Books in Burbank. And Jay said, what are you doing on Sunday? I said, nothing. He said, well, come on over. He gave me directions. And sure enough, Carroll Shelby was there, and he was interviewing him. And I got to talk to Carroll Shelby, and he remembered the Offutt Air Force Base
Really?
race. He said it was really young, and he was young in his career.
Mm-hmm.
It was really fantastic.
Wow.
Great experience.
Before we get into the details of what Manny has outlined, you brought some books as well. And how many books have you authored to date?
Well, I've offered 4, and I'm about ready to bring out a 5th. So 4 of them are on James Dean. The first book was co-produced by a number of significant Porsche files. Steve Hendricks was the brainchild of this book on the Porsche Speedster, and it included Chuck Stoddard, Jim Perrin, Marco Marinello, and Don Zing, and myself. And I did a chapter on celebrities called The Rising Star. And I talked about James Dean, and it was in this book in 2004 that I let the information out about James Dean's VIN number for his missing Speedster. Earlier, in 1985, I discovered the missing VIN for the 550. It was 550-0055. And I caught a lot of heat for that. There were a lot of people that felt that they knew the number, and Porsche themselves didn't know the number. And Tony Singer's car was 061, and he thought it was somewhere around there. It was close, but no cigar. And I found the 550, and it, certainly every time you go online, it mentions the 055 as the number, and it's attributable to this book.
Wow. And so after your experience at the race and middle school, high school, you didn't go straight. Obviously, this is not what you went straight into. So that time period in between, what were you doing?
I went into college and girls.
And your profession?
Well, it's interesting. I came home. I don't think that I intentionally emulated James Dean, but as a teenager, 13, I bought a motor scooter in Omaha called a Doodlebug. Doodlebug was sort of like a Cushman. It was a miniature Cushman.
Okay.
And it's something that was built during the late 40s, post-war, and it went to second and third hand. So someone in high school would buy it and then sell it. And I was just 13. I bought it, and it was powered by a 2.5 horsepower Clinton engine, went about 30 miles an hour. In Omaha, Nebraska, you could drive it on the street, no license. When I moved to Baltimore, when I was 13 and a half, 14, the cops were always chasing me. And I was cutting through lawns and over sidewalks. And
So you were a rebel.
They never caught me, really.
I have to ask.
Yeah, I didn't have a license. Yeah. So I had motor scooters.
Lee, is this the scooter? If you look up the screen,
Yeah, that's
for
the
YouTube,
Doodlebug. Uh-huh.
That's the Doodlebug.
That's a Doodlebug.
And I named it Little Gem, and it had the moon-equipped decal on the back.
That's cool.
And it's customized with Chevrolet Aegean paint, and I had the seat rolled and pleated like a hot rodder would do.
This is why Baltimore has a problem with young kids on motorcycles.
Exactly.
And I gave it away to a neighbor. As I got older, I didn't see any need for it. And when you go on eBay and you're looking for a Doodlebug,
They're pricey now.
$3,000 and $4,000.
Yeah, I like the white walls too.
Yeah, I painted the hand-painted white walls. Yeah,
Very nice.
you can see my shadow in the background.
So, and then you went on after college doing?
Well, I stayed with motorcycles.
Okay.
I drove to high school in Baltimore last 2 years, 30 miles a day on a Yamaha. I took the Yamaha down to the University of Alabama, where I went to college, and I sold that and bought another motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I came home for Christmas break my freshman year, and happened to be driving by Michelson Motors, which is the Volvo dealer in Baltimore. And I saw a yellow Porsche 356 on their used car lot.
Ooh.
And I stopped in. I was just 18 years old, and they let me. Must have been a slow day. They let me take a test drive,
Really?
and I loved it. And the salesman said, "There's two things that you have to remember. Porsche is a 2-syllable word, and you always keep your revs up."
Yeah.
And I never forgot that. He
Yeah.
says, when the needle gets on 2, you need to be in a lower gear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have a picture of that car too, right?
We do.
You took a picture of it?
Yeah, there's my 356. I bought it.
Oh, you bought it?
Yeah, I bought it. I begged my father for $1,500, and he said, "No, I don't think that's a bit too much for you." But I won out. I borrowed the money and paid him back, and drove the car back to college. Yeah, and kept it for a long
I
time.
don't know what a Beetle was going for
Wow.
back then.
That looks incredible.
That's a lot of money back then.
That's a lot of money back then.
This was an excellent car. It was 4 years old. And what I didn't realize, when a soldier had bought it and shipped it back, it had a custom interior. It had black leatherette seats with yellow inserts, and I had never seen that before. And also on the B, it's got the Speedster side trim on it, which is fairly rare too.
Oh. So have you been searching for that car? Or do you know where it is?
I don't know where it is. I have the number.
You do
I
have the
the
number.
VIN, and and I traded it in, and it was just starting to rust. I traded it in on a brand new 1966 912.
So have you been in a Porsche ever since?
Yes.
Really?
I've owned cars Porsche since 1961.
Oh, there's a 912.
There's my 912, yeah.
So cool.
And the interesting thing is, there was one dealer in Baltimore called Stuttgart Import in Towson.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've heard that name before.
it had just one car showroom and a 3-bay repair shop. Knowlton Long was the proprietor.
Yeah.
So I went in, and he gave me $1,200 for my 356.
Mm-hmm.
Car cost $4,600 new. And I said, well, I'd like to have a red car with a sunroof and a black interior. And he looked at me and he says, well, we drive up to Teaneck, New Jersey, and you'll get whatever they give me. So two people drove up,
Yeah.
one car, and then he drove the car back.
Oh.
So it was slate gray with a black interior,
Ooh,
no
slate-
sunroof, but
slate
it did
gray.
have a 5-speed transmission.
Slate gray is nice.
And I love that car.
You
It
can
was
tell
so
it's an
cool.
early one from the wipers being parked on the right.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh.
Exactly.
And fast forward to today, what are you driving?
So I'm driving something that I'm very comfortable with. I'm driving a 1999 Boxster 986. I love it. It's silver with the red lobster interior, just like the prototype. And you can see from the photo, you can see that I had the James Dean tail stripes, the red tail stripes, signal red painted on the back, so it would be more distinctive.
Very nice.
I
do-
remember when you first met Grant, because I was walking around with him at French Lick, and you took me to the side and said, "Who is this guy?"
I didn't
And
know him.
and I said, "He's the guy who designed your car."
Yeah, I really flipped that, and I've become really good friends with Grant. What a terrific,
He's a great guy.
What a terrific ambassador for Porsche.
Let's back up. You had quickly mentioned, and some people might not know, I think most people, when you think, especially Porsche folks, when you think of James Dean, you think of the 550 Spyder, little bastard, but you mentioned a 356 Speedster, and people might not understand where that is kind of in relation. So maybe start with that.
Well, historically, you have to remember the 356 was in its infancy. It was created in 1948. In 1950, Max Hoffmann, who was an Austrian immigrant, started Hoffmann Motor Cars in New York, became the importer for Porsche, the sole importer. So he met Dr. Porsche and the family in 1950 and arranged to be the sole importer. And so he was bringing all the cars in. There's an ad for the first Speedster. And you'll notice it says Hoffmann, and then underneath it says Competition Motors. That was his counterpart in Los Angeles. And that was started by also another Austrian named Johnny von Neumann, or Johnny Newman, as he was known. And so he was selling cars, Porsches, in 1954, 1955, and became the largest dealer and distributor on the West Coast. So the Speedster was created at the behest of Max Hoffmann. They first started with the America Roadster. It was unsuccessful because it was too expensive, all aluminum. And Hoffmann said, we need something that is more frugal, something that is basic. And they created the Speedster, a car that you could drive on the street, take the windshield off, and race it on the weekend and drive it home. So there's one of the first brochures of the Porsche Speedster, and that's a brochure that James Dean got. And
Yeah, because back then there wasn't Porsche dealers; there were sports car dealers that sold different brands.
exactly.
And they were competing against the English cars, which were much less in cost. But isn't that why the Speedster, that Hoffman told Dr. Porsche you had to come down in price to make it more competitive?
He said it needs to be under $3,000 because the Jaguar was the competition.
Yeah,
And the interesting thing is the Speedster came with that photo. You'll see there's no side mirrors.
oh yeah, that's right.
The side mirrors were optional at $5 at $5 a piece for an aero mirror.
Nothing has changed.
If
Everything
Porsche
is
could do that today, they would.
But they do, though. How many options do they have
And
available now?
Hoffman said, well, we're going to keep it at $29.95. If we put the mirror in, it will be over $3,000.
That's hilarious.
Really sticking.
I never
really
noticed that.
sticking it. Yeah. So, and James Dean bought that car and actually raced it without any side mirrors.
Now, was he into racing before the Speedster? Was he driving other cars?
James Dean grew up in Fairmont, Indiana, racing his motorbike and then
Motorbike.
motorcycles.
Oh, okay.
When he went to California in 1954, he bought a used MGTD.
Oh, okay.
His best friend, Lou Bracker, said, well, I never really could understand why he bought that car. It made a lot of noise, but it didn't go anywhere. And so the Speedster was brand new. Competition Motors was right there in Hollywood. He stopped in November 1954. The car was absolutely brand new. And James Dean actually took a test drive in the second Speedster made And the first one that came to Hoffman, Watkins Glen, and then Los Angeles. So he took a test drive in the very first Speedster on the West Coast.
So when he bought the Speedster, was he well known, or had he come out with a movie yet?
James Dean had made East of Eden.
Okay, so he's known.
So, but the movie had not been released.
Oh, okay.
So he was a young star, and von Neumann knew what he had. He said, I've got a talent here, and he's going to help me promote this car.
Oh.
And he did. James Dean bought the car. And first of all, he said, wait a few months. There's a special Speedster coming out. Don't buy the one that I have. Wait a few months. The car that he got was the first Speedster with a three-piece case. It's a 1500 Super with a three-piece aluminum case. And von Neumann knew he was getting that car. It was white with a black interior with white trim, 1500 Super. And James Dean said, I want to start racing. And von Neumann said, I'm the SCCA representative. You'll sign up here. And as soon as he bought it, he started driving across Mulholland Drive.
Right, look, no mirror on there.
Yeah, there's no mirror,
cool.
right. But this is at Palm Springs, and that's his friend Bill Stevens, or Bill Tunstall. He was also an actor. And that's James Dean's first race, second day. You'll see there's a Speedster behind him, number 86, which was...
All taped up?
all taped up in front. And his number was 86. The reason it's taped up, and everyone wanted to know, is because at Palm Springs, it was gritty. It was sand. It was a desert. So it protected the paint and it protected the chrome. And James Dean also he borrowed the tape from Dale Johnson, and he had taped the front of his car too.
And how many races did he do in the white Speedster?
He was in 3 races. The first race was Palm Springs. He raced as a novice. He didn't have a permanent number, so he took number 23. And at Palm Springs, he won his novice race on Saturday. And he qualified for the main event on Sunday. He was racing against Ken Miles, Cy Yetter, some pretty heavy duty racers, and they were racing. It was F production, and he was racing against F modified. The modified cars were MG specials, and they were faster. So James Dean was third in this race, behind Ken Miles and Cy Yetter. Ken Miles was disqualified because he used aviation fuel. He thought he could get away with it, and they saw him, with aviation fuel. So they bumped him out. Cy Yetter becomes first place. James Dean got bumped up to second. Wow. So in his first weekend of racing, he took a first in novice, and then he took a second overall. And there's a photo, Damon, there's a photo of James Dean with the trophies that you might want to show. There he is. So that's right after Palm Springs. Now this was Monday after the race, and this was the first day on the set of Rebel Without a Cause. And you see James Dean is wearing the red jacket, the famous red jacket, and there's the trophies that he won.
He took them to work? He took his trophies to work?
Not only that, they had the whole press corps there. Variety and Hollywood Reporter was there, and that's a posed photo. Yeah, they had the car and everything. Wow. The interesting thing is that James Dean had a little metal to hay incident, and it kind of crushed the right side of his fender. So all the photos taken that day are taken on the left side, and the damage isn't shown. And James Dean was the kind of guy where he was embarrassed that he had damage on the car.
Yeah.
Not only for this race, but for other races. The next day he would have it at Bill's body shop getting it fixed.
And what happened to the fate of that car?
Okay, so there's a photo at Bakersfield, and he's racing, and he raced at Bakersfield and finished third in class, 9th overall, and then in the meantime he's filming, and Warner Brothers said, we don't like this idea of racing. It's dangerous. You're a multi-million-dollar star, and we can't afford to lose you. So in his contract, he was banned from racing during the filming of Rebel Without a Cause, and for Giant. So in between Rebel Without a Cause and Giant, he was able to race at Bakersfield and Santa Barbara. It would be May Day and then Memorial Day. So 1st of May, end of May. So he raced in three races. The Santa Barbara race, there he is in Santa Barbara. You notice there's a little dent on the right-hand side, little metal-to-metal contact.
Yeah.
And in this race, he went wide in a turn, ran into some hay, over-revved his engine, and burned a piston. So he was a DNF in that race. And that winds up being his last race
In that car.
at Santa Barbara in that car. There he is on the transporter. You know, in those days, you got in the car, you drove to the race, and hopefully you finished and you drove home. Well, he wasn't so lucky in Santa Barbara. He had to rent a transporter. And that's after the race, and they had pushed the car up on the transporter.
At this point, when he goes to a race, does he bring fans out to these races? Like, do people know that he's...
Yeah, as a matter of fact, a lot of Hollywood stars came out. He invited a lot of, Tab Hunter was invited. Bruce Kessler was a good friend of his, and he's the one that sponsored him for the California Sports Car Club. Bruce Kessler and Lance Raventlow were really good friends. They raced, and Bruce Kessler went on to establish himself as a director for dozens of TV miniseries during the 50s and 60s, and recently died a few years ago.
So did the troubles that he had with the white Speedster the reason why he moved into the Spyder?
Yeah, that's the primary reason. Damon, there is a photo of James Dean looking at a Spyder with a driver, and that would have been John Porter at the Santa Barbara race.
All right, I'll bring that up in a second.
Okay, so yeah, he was a DNF. And so what do anyone that Manny knows, you're a DNF, you got nothing to do for the rest of the day. You pack up and you sort of walk around. And he was in a race with John Porter and Von Neumann. Von Neumann was racing a 550, and John Porter had one of the early 550s, and he was racing. And there's photos of James Dean talking to him. And that's when he got this bright idea, I want something faster.
Oh.
I want something faster. And Von Neumann said, maybe you need more seat time in the 550. And I don't have any 550s, but there are 5 of them coming in September.
I think this is the one of John
That's
Porter,
it. So
right?
there's John Porter. He used to wear an engineer's cap. As a matter of fact, if anybody collects old road and tracks, in 1956, there's the first road test of a 550, and they're using John Porter's number 169.
That's pretty cool because he's racing with hubcaps.
Oh.
Well, this is actually, he actually wasn't. This was after the race, and he put the hubcaps back on.
So he was driving that car home.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
No, he had it on the trailer.
Oh, he did?
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
The interesting thing is, the 550s came with hubcaps.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when James Dean died, in his estate, in his inventory, there's 4 hubcaps listed.
Wow.
Oh,
You never see him on the car.
No, of course not.
I have to comment on this photo that's up on the screen now.
Yep.
Look how small that Spyder is right next
Oh,
to the
yeah.
flagger.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
so that's John Von Neumann, and that's at Bakersfield, and John Von Neumann took the checker. That's one of the first 550s that came to America. That might be probably the first or second in the
Wow.
West Coast. So Von Neumann won the race at Bakersfield. The car is 39 inches high, to the top of the plexi.
Wow.
Yeah,
But I can imagine every racer that could afford it probably wanted a 550. So I would think James Dean's celebrity status helped him get his.
well, $6,800. That's
yeah.
a lot of money.
Sure,
You
it's
could-
like a house,
You
I
could
think.
buy a Cadillac for 3.
Wow.
So so he traded in his best friend happened to be driving home. He's an assurance agent, and that would be Lou Bracker. And he drove past Von Neumann's showroom, and he calls James Dean. He says, "Jimmy, guess what I saw in Von Neumann's showroom? A Spyder." And Jimmy said, "Oh, really?" And then talking to Lou afterwards, Lou said, he wanted to get off this phone call. That wasn't like Jimmy. I knew something was going on. And the next day, he showed up at Von Neumann. Von Neumann offered him $3,000 for his Speedster, and he had to come up with a check for $3,800. And he went to his manager and took an advance on the East of Eden film for $3,800. And on September 21st, Von Neumann handed him the keys to the 550.
Wow.
Did I read, maybe it was one of your books or one of your articles, that he got there on that, was it a Monday morning or something? He got there at the dealer like really early before it opened. He was there a couple hours before just looking at the car through the fence.
Well, that was the night before. After the phone call, unbeknownst to everybody, he was, he had his nose pressed against the plate glass window looking at the car. Yeah. That story's been embellished a little bit, but there's no question he went down to see it. So that car was sold. They were all pre-sold, and somebody had backed out of that deal, and it was available. And Von Neumann knew that Jimmy wasn't qualified for it. He only had 3 races. But they worked a deal where the mechanic, Rolf Wutterick, was Porsche trained, was sent over. Rolf was a mechanic on all the factory races in Europe, Le Mans, Reims, and he came over to help Von Neumann with the 550s. So the deal was Rolf had to go to every race with James Dean, and that's what happened on September 30th. That was James Dean's passenger. Rolf
on the Speedster, his car number was 33.
So
is there a significance to that?
So
23.
He was
it
23 was
23
Oh,
after.
23.
Yeah, so here's the deal. And this is something that perhaps your viewers don't know, but is very interesting. James Dean was a provisional racer. He had a provisional license. He had to finish 2 races in order to get a permanent number.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
So when he signed up for Palm Springs, he wanted the number 3. No, number 3 was taken. Like, for example, Phil Hill was number 2. I don't know who number 3 was, but they said, try again. So he said 13. No, 13 was taken. Some people say that was a superstitious number, but that's not true. Someone had 13. So he said, okay, 23. So why was it 3? Well, his basketball number in high school
was 3.
Was 3.
Ah.
So his first race was 23. His second race was 123. His third race was 33. And then he entered another race at Santa Barbara in September, but he couldn't race because he was still under contract. And his race was 233, number race 233. And then when he signed up for the 130, for the Salinas race, they gave him number 130.
Ah.
So there's the 3.
Yeah. Okay.
Or the 13.
So the focus is really the 3. That's his number.
Yeah.
And he just kind of made variations of it.
Yeah.
And where did the, just like on your 986 tail, like where did the stripes come?
Okay, so everyone says, well, George Barris, who was a customizer, took a lot of credit for a friendship with James Dean that really didn't exist. He had met him on Rebel Without a Cause. George had customized or mildly customized a few of the cars in that movie. George said, James Dean came to me and I painted the tail stripes and I did the little bastard on the back and the number 130. It's not true.
Oh.
George's neighbor was a pinstriper by the name of Dean Jeffries.
Oh.
The famous Dean Jeffries.
Yeah.
And Dean was introduced to James Dean through Bruce Kessler and Lance Ravetlo. He had done some pinstriping for them. He painted the little bastard in a permanent number and then painted the 130 in a washable number. Oh. And there are some photos where you actually can see on the 0, you can see there's a little paint missing.
Yeah.
And on the 3 as well. This was taken on 9/30, the last day. Now, the little bastard is, there's a lot of stories associated with that. Why did he come up with little bastard? The real story is that James Dean, after filming East of Eden, was living in the trailer on Warner Brothers, and he was told to vacate. The movie's over, time to leave. He had free housing.
Yeah.
And so Jack Warner said to his associate, "Get that little bastard off the lot." And so James Dean heard about that and said, one of these days I'm going to get back at him. So
cool.
he painted little bastard on there and he said, you know what? I'm going to race and I don't care what Jack Warner says. And everybody behind me is going to know who the little bastard is in front of them.
Oh.
Now, George Barris took credit for the pins, the tail stripe.
Yeah.
It's not true. The tail stripes were painted at Stuttgart.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Zuffenhausen. And you'll see photos if, after this conversation, you'll see photos of cars at Le Mans. They all had tail stripes. And the reason is they're running at night. The numbers were sequential, like 32, 33, 34. And it was difficult as the cars drove by in a pack to figure out who was in what position. But the last thing you saw was the tail. And so they would see the number, they would see the color. They would see blue, green, yellow, red, and that's how they designated the cars. So this car, I believe, there's the tail stripe.
Yeah.
I believe this car was destined to be an endurance car for Le Mans, but it wasn't finished in time. It was finished in July, and Le Mans ran in June. I think this car was destined to be a factory car, didn't make the cut, and then sent it over, to America.
I noticed
with that shot, that car had to look like a spaceship
Oh,
back
yeah.
then, because you have two American cars that are fairly large, and you got this little thing here. I mean, it gets attention now. Can you imagine in the 50s what that must have looked like?
Well, and no one had ever seen
Yeah.
a car like this, and especially this takes account and figures into the accident. It was so low.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, look at it. It's just
So low.
Well, this goes back to when you were talking about how young you were and you got your 356 and you went down south to college. Did the general public look at Porsches and go, wow, incredible? Or were they kind of like, that is a foreign car, not American? And how were you treated driving a German car?
Well, from my experience, growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, there was no Porsche dealer.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Porsche dealer didn't come till the 60s. It was Rosen Novak Chevrolet.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to Alabama, I know for certain that I had the only Porsche on campus.
Was that a good thing, or was that did people?
Girls loved it.
Okay.
It was
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
You got to and even when I came back to Baltimore, there was only one dealer.
Mm-hmm.
I started to go to Marlboro races.
Yeah.
So that's where I met Bruce Jennings, and Porsche was there. But the more popular cars were MG and Triumph, and more expensive cars, of course, were Jaguar.
I also noticed in one of the photos that Damon put up on the driver's side front fender is a Nürburgring.
Right.
badge.
Okay, so I always there's the
There it is. Yeah.
badge.
Yep.
And I thought initially this car maybe had raced at the Nürburgring and was brought over, because I knew that they gave the badge to all the participants, drivers and crew. All right, now, I thought that for a long time. Maybe this car was used. And I actually met John von Neumann. He said, oh, no, it came from Rolf. Rolf was a crew member. That's his personal badge. And he affixed it. He put it on the fender on that morning.
Rolf the mechanic.
Yeah, the mechanic.
Oh.
And he put it on as a gift to James Dean that morning.
Wow.
Used the Porsche rivets and put it
And
on.
they said Rolf didn't speak English very well, right?
Terrible. Yeah, he basically, spoke German, nodded his head. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
All right. So for us, PCA, we're celebrating 1955 because it's our anniversary of when the club began. But in the James Dean story, 1955 and Salinas conjures up a different kind of.
It absolutely does. And, I was thinking, because for those that don't know or haven't visited the headquarters, Vu has replicated a table for
Yeah.
blackies.
Yes.
Where the first meeting.
And we're not allowed to fit in it.
No,
we've
you're not.
tried. We can't.
But the interesting thing is, I was thinking, James Dean could have easily had become a PCA member, except there was no instantaneous membership. It was all done by mail. And maybe he had heard about PCA, but he didn't have an opportunity to become a member.
Yeah, we hope so.
And I like to say, if he had been a member, and had been around today, he'd be one of the oldest living members.
I think so.
And
for sure.
if he was stayed alive for a couple more years, then we would have made it out west.
Yeah.
We started on the East Coast, and then we migrated out west.
That's right.
But yeah.
And I know from living in Omaha, the Porsche Club of America, the Grand Plains region, didn't start till the late 60s. And my best friend in junior high was Larry Cabbage, and was the first president of PCA in Great Place. The late great Howard Shoemaker, the famous illustrator, grew up in Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh,
That's right. That's
Uh-huh.
right. Yeah.
so he finally convinces for them to sell him the car. He has a mechanic, and now it's time to go racing. Head north.
Okay, so he had signed up for Salinas. He wanted to go to Salinas because they filmed in Montesino, which replicated Salinas for the East of Eden movie. So he had a big following out there, and, he wanted to take advantage. James Dean was very clever. He always had a photographer with him. He had a photographer at every race, and he was taking a photographer with him to Salinas. His name was Sanford Roth. Okay, and Sanford Roth was going to do a shoot for Collier's magazine. And so in that photo, there's the mechanic, Rolf Wooderick. James Dean. This was taken on Ventura Boulevard just after they left the Competition Motors. And the photograph is taken by Sanford Roth driving James Dean's Ford Country Squire, and he's pulling alongside of him. This is actually the next to last photo taken of James Dean alive.
Wow.
No matter how much we try, we will never look as cool as that.
No, I mean, I was just thinking of how cool
I would
he
have
looked.
I would have a scrunched up face.
Yeah.
And the
Well, first you don't have the hair, the flowing hair.
Then the cigarette, right?
and he got the cigarette in his
Yeah,
mouth. And I would say,
I used to be that cool with cigarettes.
No, you weren't.
and I did too, briefly. And,
One of these how I think I look versus reality.
not easy driving at 90 miles an hour with a cigarette, but
Is the Country Squire one of the cars that's in the background at the gas station?
yes,
Oh.
So
good
this
call.
this is the last, for the record, everybody.
That's a Cadillac.
For the
Oh.
last,
That's a
Cadillac,
for the
the black
record,
one.
this
Yeah.
is the last photo of James Dean alive.
Wow.
Taken. This is in Sherman Oaks on Ventura Boulevard, not far from where James Dean actually lived. That's his Country Squire, and you can see the dual axle trailer.
So they
at
brought
the
a
back.
trailer in case he needs to tow it back.
Well, they were going to tow it, but the fact is that he had less than 300 miles on the clock, so they needed to break the engine in.
Oh, man.
Otherwise, the car would have been on the trailer.
I'm just thinking, as you're saying all this, there's so many
What if?
what ifs. Like, what if he decided to trailer? What if he just, wow.
Okay, so this photo is worth at least 2,000 words. Why? First of all, it's in color. If you look at the car and you look at the air vent in the front and you see the gasket, in real time, the gasket is black. It's black rubber. This gasket has overspray on it.
It's silver.
Yes, because James Dean had a shunt. He had a shunt, and he fixed it before they could go to Salinas. Notice the driver's side lens.
Oh,
that's
broken. Missing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's broken, and they didn't have a spare in those days, so it's broken. Now, if you look at the hood and you look at the gap on the driver's side, you see there's a little dent on the bottom left at 5 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, at 25 after 5.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the shunt.
So he had already raced this car?
No, on the street, he had a boo-boo.
He had a boo-boo on the street.
And on the left side, you can't see it in this photo, and I don't think I have photos present. There's also a dent in the left, in the right rear corner. He spun out and hit some trash cans. On Mulholland
So this
Drive.
car would have been double the horsepower of the Speedster and maybe a little bit lighter, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, sure, 1,300 pounds.
So it would be going like from a Boxster to a GT3 RS.
Wow.
That's without PSM to save you.
Right.
Yeah, this was a 130 mile an hour car. The Speedster would do 108, 109 perhaps. This is a great photo because you can see the interior. It's not real red. It's the lobster red that they used for the Boxster.
Huh.
Okay, so this is a gas station. It's a mobile station. and it lasted forever into decades. Now it's a Whole Foods market. And my idea, I have an idea, I'd like to put up a plaque, get Whole Foods to put up a plaque that this was what it looked like, you know, back in 1955.
Wow.
It's a fantastic photo.
So that's his wagon as well.
Yeah.
And
So
they followed him all. They were following him all the way.
exactly, and of course, they were 10 minutes behind because of the trailer. Now, the interesting thing is, everyone says, "Well, Rolf, the photographer, took the photo." No, it's in color. The photo was taken by the mechanic, Rolf Wooderick, with his Leica 35 millimeter.
Oh.
And he only took 2 shots at Competition Motors, and this is the last shot of James Dean. And the camera was found at the wreck, and the film was developed in November. It's quite a story about the camera.
I'm not an expert on photography, but I would think even 35 millimeter back then had to be pretty high end. Because they were using like 110, weren't they back then?
Yeah.
Little film, not the.
But Rolf was German, so he had access to
Leica.
to the Leica,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wow.
And so I'm in contact with someone in Europe that has the Leica camera, but
Oh, has the camera that took that photo?
it's not up for sale. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, so got gas, headed north, and for those that don't know the story or know what happened, what happened?
Okay, so they headed north on Sepulveda Boulevard, which is a very long stretch. It's also known as Highway 99. And it heads north through the Grapevine, and then it goes into Bakersfield. Now, before they got into Bakersfield, they were clocked by California Highway Patrol when driving an Oldsmobile, who did a yo-yo and followed them. No radar in those days. He pulled over the Spyder and he pulled over the station wagon, and he ticketed James Dean, and he ticketed the driver of the station wagon, not because he was speeding, but because he was speeding with a trailer, and he had to be doing 45 instead of 55. Okay?
Oh, my God.
So James Dean got a ticket. I have a copy of the original ticket exceeding 55 miles an hour. The driver, the CHP officer died a number of years ago, but I interviewed him, and he stood about 6'2", and he said he couldn't believe the car was so low; it was up to his kneecaps. And he said to James Dean, "This is a great car. You look like a great guy." Didn't know that he was an actor, but he gave his address as Warner Brothers, and he said, "You better slow down, or you're not going to make the race."
Really? Whoa.
Okay, so there was a warning.
Chilling, a
There
warning.
was a warning.
Yeah.
All right. So right where they got the ticket, it's called Wheeler's Ridge. They made a left-hand turn onto what the racers called the Racers Road. And it was not necessarily a shortcut, but it was a fast cut getting over to Route 466 at Blackwell's Corner. So James Dean probably was doing over 100 miles an hour from the time that he got the ticket to Blackwell's Corner. So they arrived at Blackwell's Corner, and as he was pulling in, it's a gas station and a convenience store. It's very famous today, especially because everybody knows James Dean stopped there. The interesting thing is, as he was pulling in, James Dean was pulling in, he saw a Mercedes 300 SL Coupe, and it belonged to Lance Ravello and Bruce Kessler. And so they talked, and they said they almost got stopped by a highway patrol, but they decided to pull over and put up the front hood so that so maybe the CHP would go by, which he did. Didn't get him a ticket.
All right.
And Bruce told me, he said they had been there and they were ready to leave. James Dean came in, and James Dean sent the mechanic over to the highway to flag the station wagon in because they wouldn't see them. So they were there for about 10 or 15 minutes. So they all agreed to meet for dinner at Paso Robles, which was about a little over an hour away, at 6:30. So Lance and Bruce left in the Mercedes, and then James Dean left about 10 minutes later. So 30 minutes into the trip on 466 West, it's an area that is flat, and then it goes over a mountainous area. That's actually the fault, the earthquake fault. And there's a 45-degree drop from the Polonio Pass to a junction called Chelam, which was 466 and 41. I've been across that stretch in the modern day, and I've also been across that stretch driving 100 miles an hour because I wanted to sense what James Dean saw when he got down to the flat. So as James Dean is driving, he's in fourth gear. He's driving over 100 miles an hour easily. He came up very quickly on a Ford sedan and didn't realize that he was going to run into it and made an evasive move to the left to pass him. This is a 2-lane highway, and he passes the Pontiac and forces an oncoming car to go off to the shoulder of the road.
Oh.
So he passes this car, and then he gets back in his lane, and there's less than 500 yards to the junction. And then you'll see where the W is, that's Robert White, that's the Pontiac. He had just passed it, and then he sees an oncoming Ford going to make a left turn, not conventionally. The man is cutting in the corner and going pretty fast, and so he sees open space on the right, so James Dean did a racing maneuver and sort of sidestepped, moved to the right, but he lost control of the car, and that was typical of a 550. He took his foot off the gas, and the rear end came around. So where the car is actually headed in a 45-degree angle, the rear end is actually moving counterclockwise, and he hits the car left front to left front.
Oh.
And the Ford sees the Spyder, and you can see he put down skid marks twice. He skidded, then he went back on the gas, and he skidded again. So he was indecisive and probably was amazed that this rocket ship was coming at him, 39 inches tall.
Oh.
And it was 100 degrees, so there had to be like a mirage effect, you know, on the pavement. So I'm sure he did.
What time of day is this?
This is at, this is at 5:45 p.m.
Okay.
And this is actually standard time. When you do this today, it's daylight savings time, and it's still light, but it was getting dark at that point. And there were hills behind on the west, and the sun was actually behind the hill. So you came from a sunny position coming down Polonio Pass, and then at the accident scene, it was getting darker.
Oh.
So
the car that he passed, they witnessed?
they saw the whole thing.
They saw the whole
And the
thing.
whole beauty of this is that this guy is an accountant with his wife, pretty intelligent, you know, knew
in
what
the Pontiac.
in a Pontiac, knew what he saw.
Uh-huh.
And the wife said, I saw the accident. The car went up in the air and turned over, and something fell out. Well, the something was Rolf Wooderick. He fell out of the car after the collision. And Robert White said there were no brake lights.
And I do have to say, the next pictures that we show, if you're on YouTube, if you don't want to see a mangled up accident, this is your warning.
Good point, Damon.
Okay, so
Yikes.
this is the after effect. The car did not spin around on the ground. It went up in midair and did a barrel roll counterclockwise and landed on its wheels. Now, of course, if it had landed upside down, everybody would say, well, the car turned over. It did turn over. And if you look at, the accident in the rear end of the car, you can see that everything is crumpled in the back. But this car took a tremendous hit. And there are those that, want to protect James Dean and say, oh, he wasn't speeding. He was going, the speed limit. No, you don't see this kind of damage on any kind of car unless he was speaking.
Yeah.
Did Rolf say did James Dean say anything in his final words before? Well, was it silent as they both approached?
Well, you'll see in many publications that purportedly, James Dean said, that guy up there, he's got to stop. He's got to see us. Rolf Wooderick was dozing, because it was so hot he was dozing, and doesn't recall James Dean saying anything. And I think in the split second that this accident happened, maybe he got one or two words out, like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
that's it. And so,
So the
Ja-
mechanic got thrown out, but James Dean, did he?
yeah, so the interesting thing is Rolf installed a seatbelt at Competition Motors that morning, but James Dean wasn't wearing it. There was no seatbelt on the right because it was a race car. There was no need for it. The interesting thing about the Porsche Spyder is that there was a strap that held the passenger seat at the top so it didn't move forward. So the seat was fixed. James Dean's seat came off the rail.
Oh wow.
Now you actually can see the seat dead center on this photo. There's a bucket seat,
Yeah.
black.
The black. Yeah.
Okay, that was James Dean's seat. James Dean remained in the car because his left foot was crushed between the brake and the clutch.
Oh, wow.
He was captive. He was absolutely captive. If that hadn't happened, James Dean would have bounced out of the car too.
Oh. Yeesh.
So it was really a tragic thing. The damage on that car is sufficient. I mean, really,
Yeah.
James Dean took the brunt of the accident. Rolf was hurt very badly. His leg, one of his legs was turned around 90 degrees. He lost his teeth.
Don't
you
get too
know.
graphic. He might pass out.
Yeah, I'm the one's gonna miss out.
And he was basically unconscious. So you can see Rolf was lying on the ground, you know, and was still alive. James Dean basically died, you know, from his injuries. He took the brunt. You know, the front of that Ford, it's a 1950 Ford. It had a lot of steel in the grill, and that's really, you know.
How was the driver that was crossing over?
Well, the interesting thing about that, his head hit the windshield glass, cracked the glass, and he had a laceration on his nose.
But he lived.
He lived, yeah. Everyone wants to know what Donald Turnipseed, that was the driver. That's Donald Turnipseed on the left. That's him.
Okay.
And
is that the family that was in the Pontiac?
No, this was a family that came up right after the accident.
Oh, okay.
But look at the skid marks.
Yeah. Oh.
And
yeah.
and you see this Ford, which weighs over 2 tons, was pushed backward, you know.
from an aluminum body
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
You can't do that at low speed.
That's 40 feet that
Yeah.
was pushed back.
Wow.
So, and you can see that the left front wheel is right into the firewall. I mean, it really that's solid steel.
So he probably shouldn't have turned left because it wasn't clear, but speed was certainly a factor for this happening.
There's no question. So at the inquest, you know, Donald Turnipseed had an attorney. James Dean was not represented. There was no attorney there. Rolf gave testimony that he really didn't know. He lost consciousness, and because of the trauma, he didn't remember the accident happening. The interesting thing is the attorney told Donald Turnipseed, keep your mouth shut.
Oh.
Donald Turnipseed didn't give any type of warning that he was turning left. No hand signal, no turn signal. Was probably going 50, 55 miles an hour. Probably was up on 2 wheels at that speed with that car. And didn't take the conventional yield and then a turn. He was cutting across.
Right. He was like apexing the corner.
James Dean obviously was speeding. How do I know that? Well, I looked at the Porsche manual for the 550, and I looked at the gear ratio. There actually, Damon, there's a sketch that maybe we can put up. Okay, so it's hard to read, but basically there's first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and it's got your speed on the left-hand side. So you're not really going to shift into fourth gear unless you're going 75, 80 miles an hour. And there's the range, you know, between the speed.
Yeah.
So the fact is that, how do I know he was speeding? That transaxle, in years later, was looked at and examined, and fourth gear was jammed. It was jammed in fourth gear.
So it was in fourth gear
Yeah.
at the time of the accident.
Exactly.
Oh.
And you look at the damage of the car.
Sure, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it wasn't something. So there's all the defense about James Dean not speeding. So at the inquest, they decided that both were speeding. that Donald Turnipseed failed to yield to an oncoming car. If you and I had been in that situation in any state, we would have been charged with at least a misdemeanor fatality. There was a fatality involved, and Donald Turnipseed was not charged, so he got off. He is a local. He got off. There's reasons for this. The jury basically lived in that area. Donald Turnipseed was a Navy veteran. He was going to school in the GI Bill. His wife was pregnant. James Dean was this rising star with a $7,000 sports car and a German mechanic who was part of the Luftwaffe during World War II.
Oh, interesting.
And this is 10 years after the war, and they took it out.
Wounds are pretty fresh still.
Exactly. And so...
So how quickly did first of all, did the police or anyone know that was James Dean in the car? Obviously, he was pretty roughed up.
Nobody recognized him. And then Bill Hickman, who was driving the car. Bill Hickman is a very famous stunt driver. He's the one that was driving the Dodge and Bullet that crashed into the gas station and exploded. And he was in the French Connection. So Bill Hickman basically went to James Dean, cradled him, and, saw that he was...
Was he the one driving the wagon?
He was driving the wagon,
okay.
Yeah, because he had the experience.
So, he came up onto the accident 10 minutes
10 minutes later, exactly.
Oh, wow.
So he got... And the ambulance driver, got a crowbar and, extricated James Dean.
Wow.
And they put him into the interesting thing is the Shalem Garage, which was a mile and a half west, was a gas station, a garage, and had an ambulance. And someone said, well, why do they have an ambulance? And I said, because there's so many accidents. They called that Blood Alley, that whole junction. So there was a need for an ambulance there. So they took him to the hospital at Paso Robles, which was 30 miles away.
But did he die at the scene, or did he die at the
Well, I
hospital?
think that he was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital, but Bill Hickman thought that he, had succumbed at the accident.
At the accident. Oh,
Yeah.
man.
So Donald Turnipseed was basically unscathed, didn't know who James Dean was. Nobody knew who James was. Later, the two officers, Tripke and Nelson, came upon the scene, and they had a lot to handle, and it was getting dark. They had to put up flares, and so when they interviewed this Captain Tripke, he said, "Well, I didn't know who James Dean was." I said, and then I thought, well, maybe it's the sausage maker.
Jimmy Dean.
Jimmy Dean, yeah. And then I thought, and I said, well, Jimmy Dean and the sausage didn't come on until the early 60s.
Yeah.
So that's something that he kind of fabricated in his head, as a knee-jerk response.
So now the wreckage of the car, and if any of you has followed this, what happens to the car, and then there's even this whole possible thought of a curse around the car.
And of course, the curse is very much alive. And it gets perpetuated. Discovery Channel just did an episode on that. Not a great one, but I've been involved in probably half a dozen cable channel episodes about that. So the Spyder is still missing. So let's do a backflip. The car was taken back to Competition Motors. The insurance company bought the car. Paid James Dean's father, Winton Dean, $6,000 for the car. Then the car moved over to All Auto Parts near Burbank.
Like a salvage yard? Or?
Yeah, salvage yard,
Okay.
and it was put up for sale. It just so happens that one of the racers, William Eskridge, Dr. Eskridge, lived in Burbank, raced against James Dean at Palm Springs and Bakersfield and Santa Barbara, knew exactly what he was racing against. He ran a special. He was first on the scene, bought the entire wreck for $1,050 and tax, so it was $1,092.
But he did a lot for a wreck.
Yeah.
I'm sure he thought he was nutty to buy that car.
Took it home, but he realized the engine wasn't touched.
Oh.
Oh, the forecam.
So Dr. Eskridge bought a Lotus 9, a roller, without an engine. You know, Lotus was made without an engine. You could put a company Climax in or a Bristol. And he decided, I'm going to take the 4-cam, mount it up front, and have my special. And he put it together. He's a great engineer. And used the engine, used an MG transmission, you know, for gears and everything. And basically parted out everything else. He called his special the POTUS. Not President of the United States, but
Yeah.
Porsche Lotus, POTUS.
Oh, Porsche Lotus, of course.
Very clever, 1955.
That's funny.
And he raced it successfully.
Oh.
You know, he fine-tuned it and raced it. It was an F modified. There's a photo of the POTUS that maybe Damon can put up.
So does that car and engine exist?
The engine exists. The family still has the engine. The car was parted out. So
No,
let's-
which
Is
family
this the
has
car
it?
right
the
here?
Eskridge family.
The Eskridge
yeah, that's
family.
the POTUS, yeah.
Oh.
See, it says POTUS, dead center.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a pretty cool car.
159F. There it is. And
There's
there's
the
the
car.
4-cam.
It's so
engine.
bizarre seeing that in the front.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean,
He made it work.
The guy was a genius.
Wow.
Really?
So his family still has that engine today?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But
Oh.
there's a story to it, right?
Yeah, there's a story to it, yeah. So there's a story to the POTUS as well. Let's just backtrack because the rest of the car, what I call the carcass,
Uh-huh.
Eskridge, Dr. Eskridge basically had some friends and they were going to take it to the dump. They were going to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Somehow George Barris, through a friend Jim Hall, got wind of the car and Barris said, well, I'm going to resurrect it, you know, and basically use it for a safety prop.
Oh.
So he got it. George Barris will tell the story that he bought the whole car from the insurance company. That's not true. So what he bought was a car without an engine, without a tranny, without trailing arms, you know. He bought a car, and then there are photos of the car, which we can put up on display. So basically it was a shell.
Oh,
Now-
sort of like the prom, like Be Safe
Now,
campaign.
this was, you know, typically this was through, you know, a safety driving,
Yeah.
you know, prop.
Speed
It was
kills.
taken around to all the custom car shows. There's an advertisement for it. Now, if you look at the left side of the car, that doesn't look like the car that was in the wreck.
Yeah, what doesn't? Yeah, it looks.
So this has been fabricated. They took sheet metal and they reconfigured the left side, and then they took a 2x4 and banged it to look like it was seriously in a wreck. The only part that looks original is the hood and the left side, the front left.
Like if you
Front
ordered a
right
550 from Temu.
So, and all the inserts were taken out. The seats were left in, and there's the wreck. I mean,
Yeah.
so it hardly looks like what was put on display.
Huh. Wonder why he just didn't display that. Why did he try to bang it out and
I guess they felt that was too gory.
Oh, this was too gory.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
For public back in the
Yeah,
50s.
for public consumption.
That would be too much.
Yeah, they used,
I
you know,
get it.
they were trying to, and you can see in this photo, look directly back, there's the Ford on the left side, the white hood.
yeah.
There's So both of them were taken to the Shalem garage. I mean, that's,
the Ford that hit.
yeah, that's a 3,000 pound
yeah.
car. It got
Yeah.
really
Steel
rearranged.
Yeah, steel car.
Yeah.
And look where the steering wheel is on the Spyder. It's like it's center now.
Yeah, it got pushed over. Yeah.
Jeez, that's crazy.
So it was a hell of a
So
wreck.
Barris has the car, sort of.
So he reconfigures it, then puts it on display, and this is what George Barris did for a living. He was known as a custom car Hollywood star, but before that happened, he would basically he was a traveling circus. He had a transporter, and he had all kinds of race cars and special cars. And as I mentioned to you, in 1960 at the Baltimore Auto Show, I saw James Dean's car on display. And so if you were a promoter, you'd say, well, I want George Barris to supply me with 2 or 3 cars, and he would lease them to you. And those would be the headliners.
Ah, I gotcha. Yep.
So that's how he made a living.
Whoa. And
So the car in 1960 wound up in Miami for a display. George Barris says it was a police highway patrol display, but it wasn't. It was a regular car show.
Oh.
And there's evidence of that. And then he says, well, when the car was shipped back to me, at first he said a box car, and then it was a truck. Well, actually, it was a truck. They opened up the truck, and he said it was missing. And they went to all the weigh stations, and the weight was the same. So they felt that the car was stolen in Miami. It never made the truck. We don't know that for sure. I happen to know that what he said was not true, that there were 2 other exhibits in Arizona that had this car after Miami. So the car made it back to the West Coast, and he just really concocted a story
That it was lost.
missing.
Oh.
My feeling and my investigation is, after speaking to people, it made it back to his shop in California, and then it was up on the roof under a tarp for a number of years that he had it. And I think that he felt that this car was not a headliner anymore, said it got lost. It was a great story, great promotion, and he probably filed, I'm just supposing, for an insurance claim on it. Now, in years, I'm talking about when I did this book in 2005, James Dean at Speed, I had interviewed George Barris a number of times, and he said, well, the car disappeared, and every time I interviewed him, the story changed a little bit, and I felt that he knew more than this. So in 2015, which would have been the 60th anniversary of James Dean's death, I came out with a book that was more detailed, James Dean on the Road to Salinas, which covers the minute-by-minute detail that we've been discussing. And I called George and I said, look, I'm coming out to California. Let's have lunch and let's put everything up on the table. And then I didn't hear anything. I thought that I had lost the connection, but I thought I heard him breathing. And he said, I'm still here, Lee. He said, you're a pretty smart guy and you know more facts than anyone else, but I like the story just the way it is.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so the story goes on. We haven't seen the car. There are circumstances that say, well, the car was hidden here, it was there, maybe the family had it. The family really wasn't vindictive. The family didn't want to be involved with it. They didn't steal the car. It's not in hiding. I think George Barris got rid of it. The question is where did he put it?
Did he
And that's where we are today. And that's what we're looking at. And there's a possibility that it's not in California, that it may be in the state of Washington.
Could it have just simply been disposed of? Because did he know that it was?
It was time. Well, I think George Barris decided it was time to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the Jimmy Hoffa.
So, exactly. Buried with Jimmy Hoffa.
Wherever that may be.
Wherever that might
Or
be.
in the Meadowlands, perhaps.
Wow.
So, the story goes on, and it's probably going to go on beyond my lifetime.
Wow. Well, there are I know we're already at the top of the hour, and this has been, I've talked to you many a times, but this has been extra special for me. There's way more details, and I know I learn something every time I talk to you. And for those of you that don't get a chance to meet Lee in person, you got to definitely check out his books. And as he says, he details it all. And such a wealth of knowledge, and you're constantly chasing things down. I know you've had a few years ago, you had updates on the white Speedster. It just continues and continues. My question to you is the relatives of James Dean today, how engaged are they in all of this?
Well, I'm very friendly with the Winslow family. Mark Winslow
okay.
is actually, Damon, we have a photo, I think, of James Dean and his cousin, Mark Winslow, in the beginning.
Near the beginning.
I think so. Maybe not.
Well, as he brings that up, I'm just going to remind folks, be sure to head over to PCA.org to sign up for PCA's newsletters, performance news, e-brake news, Mart Fresh, all free. You can just do that at PCA.org. Manny, we've already burned up an hour.
So I'd just like to say one thing. I have a new book coming out. It's been a long time coming. It has to deal with the Speedster. It's called James Dean and the Porsche 356 Speedster, Love at First Sight. And it's the whole story about the Speedster.
Which could be another podcast. 'Cause
No,
I've listened to Lee's
It could be.
presentation. It's an hour long about how.
And the
the
Speedster
search
is
for this-
live and well. I just spoke with the owner
the
this
real
morning.
Speedster, because there was
Yeah,
a
the real
fake
Speedster.
one.
And there's a question about a bogus Speedster. I've written articles in the Porsche registry called The Tale of Two Speedsters.
Oh.
There's only one VIN, 80126, and there's only one car. And I have disproved the embellished story. So this is a real story. It's live. The car is in Hungary. I've been trying to get it to America. We've had some problems, but hopefully Porsche will recognize that this car is the real deal. And the first place that it should be is in the Stuttgart Museum for a few months.
I wonder what a car like that would sell for.
Oh,
Well,
gosh.
Over $3 million, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Manny, we only have real quickly one news item has to do with WeatherTech round 5 at Detroit.
Yes, so the 4-race streak for the 963 was broken, and Detroit, they finished third. They still lead the points standings by a nice, healthy margin. Both 6 and 7 teams, third place at BMW, and they've got 4 races left, so here's crossing fingers. Of course, the next big race is Le Mans, which is a WEC, and that's going to be a whole different ball of wax than IMSA, because in IMSA, Ferrari doesn't run, and Ferrari is doing in WC what Porsche is doing in IMSA. They're winning all the races. So, 24 hours, a long time at Le Mans. A lot of things can happen. Let's, I'm not above for hoping for breaking down of our favorite Italian mark and giving Porsche their first win of the 963, but it's going to be fun to watch. The other thing that's going to show up at Le Mans, if you haven't seen it yet, Porsche gave a little sneak video. They just showed only parts of the car, and it's believed to be the first 963 street car. I didn't notice this right off the bat. I saw RSP, and in my head I'm thinking it must be RS prototype. But a lot of the news agencies are saying that that's actually Roger Penske's initials. His middle name's an S. So they're thinking it's a special car built for Roger Penske, a road car. I noticed that all the craftsmen who were in the video are wearing Porsche Classic overalls, which was kind of interesting because the Germans are pretty much, the classic people work on classic stuff.
Yeah.
And the people who are the factory guys, Thunderwunsch guys, wear something different, I think. So I'm really curious to see what this will be. And if it is a special Roger Penske edition, 1 of 1, then we have a lot of questions for Mr. Fabi.
I was about to say,
when he comes to the parade in July, because that is like beyond cool that they took a car that does not have a passenger seat, the race car. That's all electronics in the passenger side. So it'll be interesting to see how they convert this to a street car.
Well, you mentioned Porsche Parade, and by the time this comes out, I believe Porsche Parade registration will have been closed. We've got over 900 families coming to Oklahoma City July 6th through 12th, and we're looking forward to that. Seeing Mr. Fabig, some PAG folks, and other VIPs. It's going to be an incredible event. I want to remind you that Works Reunion Monterey is August 15th. Registration is open. Looking forward to seeing you there. And those of you that might consider sailing with us, we have Trefin at Sea 2025, our 70th anniversary cruise, August 30th to September 6th.
Going to New England.
Going to New England
Canada.
and Canada. Did you want to do a quick update on videos, Damon?
Yes, we have it's been quite the show. I've been all over this switchboard here. But we had our national EV coordinator, David Bankston, recently went out to Porsche Naples earlier this year and decided to educate us on what the battery looks like, how it works, and basically how you make a repair to individual cells or modules. There is not anything like it on YouTube. Nope. And if you want to know how Porsche Taycan batteries work, and in essence, for the most part, other Porsche batteries, watch this video.
It's done by Goldmeister Tech, I believe.
Yep, Goldmeister Tech
Naples,
and shop foreman at Porsche Naples, Mike Johnson, did an excellent job.
Phenomenal. He's very articulate and takes the time to explain to the layman what's involved to replace a battery. And it's not like sticking a 9-volt in your remote control at home. It's really, I told Damon, I said, I looked on YouTube to see if there was any other videos like this. Just
Nothing
to
like it.
compare to see if we missed anything or whatnot. Nothing like it. A lot of battery videos, but they're talking about how long it lasts and whatnot. Nothing showing the actual replacement. And I think that's one of the things unique to Porsche is that you can replace the cells versus having to replace the entire battery unit. So it's really interesting. Even if you don't like EVs, but if you like tech, you're going to find this interesting.
There you go.
And I will say, most of the stuff, if you had the proper tools, one person could probably do it. If they had, all the tools, equipped garage. But there is one thing, and you'll have to watch the video for it, that takes at least 5, probably more like 10 people to do one thing on this battery, which is the one thing that makes it not a one-person job.
You have to watch the video to find out.
The other video that'll be coming out pretty soon here, it's already edited, is Bogdan filmed you and James Patrick at Patrick Motorsports.
Yeah. That was a cool, very cool tour.
Yes.
We were out in Arizona for some other videos, and thank you to Richard Strahota for arranging for us to stop by Patrick Motors. And we've known them. They've been to Works Reunion, have won several trophies there. Beautiful example cars, but I didn't know really the size and scope of their facility.
And how organized they are. They have so many used parts, but everything is cataloged. And
Oh, yeah.
I told them, I said, you don't know how impressive this is, because I've been in a lot of warehouses, and having used parts just so well cataloged was.
Yep.
And the guy who works in the parts department after you guys left filming, I said to him, I'm like, yeah, this is really impressive. And he goes, oh, trust me, we spend a lot of time because this isn't by accident. This takes a lot of work to keep it this organized.
Yeah, you'll have to check that video out. It's incredibly impressive.
Yep,
All right.
and the last thing, just Ford GTS T-Hybrid review coming soon, but we've got these other two first, so just stay tuned.
There you go. Also want to remind you to check out PCA Sim Racing, PCASimRacing.com. We also have insider swag at the PCA web store, PCAwebstore.org. You can get bottles, mugs, t-shirts, and if you're just simply looking for a PCA Insider decal, send your address information to podcast@pca.org, and we'll send you a few. Mr. Raskin, thank you so much for spending time with us. It's always a pleasure to hear the story, and thank you for sharing it. I mean, this is your lifelong passion, and I'm glad that we're kind of able to capture all this and share with it for the next generation of PCA members and Porsche enthusiasts, because I think this is important. This is part of the sort of the Porsche heritage and legacy, and just for us to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. And, I've been a PCA member for 53 years. Could have been a little longer, but I'm very proud to be a PCA member. And I certainly encourage all of your viewers, if they have questions, I'm certainly available, and I'll be happy to answer any of their questions.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing our show with fellow Porsche enthusiasts. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll catch you down the road.